heard some great presenters today, and I've been so impressed by the conference so far, and I kind of questioned what they were thinking when they invited me to come. So probably 2 weeks ago, I gave one of my toughest presentations that I've been working for Validus for about 14, 15 years now, and 2 weeks ago, my daughter came to me and said, "Dad, will you present to my 4-H club?" So I got up in front of kids that range from the age of third graders to high school seniors. And the leader said, "You have 20 minutes to capture their attention. Good luck." So that was kind of a challenge. That gives you a good test to see how good you are in front of people. And if you can keep kids' attention for that long, you must be doing something right. So Dr. Good gave you a little bit of the background on me. My name is Matt Jones. I'm from a company called Validus. We're located in Des Moines, Iowa, and we specialize in third-party animal welfare audits. And the previous presenter, John, when he was up here presenting, there were a lot of cool things that were running through my mind as I saw the technology and the things that they're doing in place when they're shipping animals from point A to point B. So some really cool things that are out there. We are an ISO company, an ISO 9001, 2008, and also an ISO 1765. So a lot of letters, a lot of numbers, and people may question what that means. From my standpoint, to boil it down, because I'm kind of a nuts and bolts type of guy, it really comes down to we are an auditing firm that gets audited. So that's always good, because when you are the one sitting across the desk, you pick up a lot of important things, things that you like, things that go well through the audit process, things that you don't like. We deal with a lot of livestock producers throughout the United States, and when you pick up the phone and you say, "Hello, my name's Matt, and I'm going to be setting up an audit," a lot of times there's some dead air on the other end, because people hear that word audit and they freeze. They get really nervous about it. So one of my jobs and responsibilities is to try to ease that pain, if you will, and try to come across that audits, if used properly, can be used as continual improvement. Ways to look at your operation to improve that facility versus looking at it as a pass-fail type of situation. So some folks, they hear that word audit, they instantaneously think of IRS, that knee-jerk reaction, and go, "Oh, this isn't going to be good." But that's one of my responsibilities, to try to really get it across that it's really, let's focus on the continual improvement. How can we make the operation better? And that's how I look at it. As painful as it may be with the person sitting across from you asking a lot of questions, that's how I take it. How can I take this experience, make it better, and move our company forward from that standpoint? We do have a lot of certifications, a lot of them based around the ISO certification. So ISO is quality. ISO is also from a safety standpoint. We are a safe quality foods audit firm, which means that we can go into a plant. So not only do we audit to the livestock side of things, we also can audit finished product from a safety and quality standpoint. And then we try to make sure that all of our auditors go through a group that's called PACO. PACO, if you don't know who they are, they're the Professional Animal Auditing Certification Organization. So a group of animal scientists, veterinarians, group of animal experts that come together, put together trainings, certifications that solidify our trainings as well. So we send folks through that because it's important. You need to make sure that not only are you training your own folks, but you're also sending them out and sending them through another additional training. It helps us from a conflict of interest to ensure that folks we are who we say we are. And then we maintain that certification. So with any kind of training, you have to maintain a certain amount of hours of continuing education credits to maintain your certification. So we are a auditing firm. Going on almost 4 years ago now, we were purchased by an entity called Where's Food Comes From. So it's been a 3-year, 4-year transitional period. But what we have learned from that standpoint is now we are a true division of a larger entity. And so where food comes from, we are a division of that. We also work with the other divisions. So IMI does the beef side of things. ICS works on the organic side of things. Sure Harvest, which is a recent purchase, they have a technology background. They also do almonds, nuts, wineries, grapes, things of that nature. And then you have us that's on the livestock sector. So as you start looking, when you have a client that comes to you and say, well, I've got wholesaler X, Y, and Z, and they're requesting all of these demands out of us, and you know, we're going through, I've heard some real horror stories where folks are saying, I'm going through 10, 15 audits a year, what can you do for me? Well, how can you help? So that's kind of the thought process of the company. With all of these expectations that are out there and additional audits, how can we bring everything, whoops, that thing's close. How can we bring everything together and bundle services so that you don't have 10, 15 auditors going across your facility. Now you have one audit firm that's coming across your facility, and we can do 10 and 15 audits for you. So that's our goal. That's the expectation of my CEO, John Saunders. That's the expectation of the company. What can we do to bundle services and provide that so the client's not, it's already a stressful situation in many times, or folks take it that way. So how can we solidify and reduce that stress level? So always growing, always new things, and the goal is to have either one or a group of auditors that can come out over a week's time, knock out the audits, and for the next 300 and some odd days of the year, you're sitting in pretty good shape from that standpoint. Really, why we're so successful at what we do is, or at least this is why always a grain of salt, this is why I believe we're so good at what we do. It all comes down to the people. When we look for auditors, they go through a pretty in-depth, painstaking process. Because what I want to avoid is any producer that goes out to do a beef site that would go out to meet with Dr. Good, and the first thing he's going to ask is, what's your experience? And they're going to say, I've never been on a dairy or a beef or a bull stud in my life. That sets the tone. That's not a good conversation to have. In fact, that's a good conversation to get you excused really quickly, where folks will say, there's the door in the back, I'm going to ask you to leave. So we really heavily concentrate on folks that have been in the industry 15, 20 years. They're at a point in their career that this might be another piece of their business. They may be looking for something else in their career. They may be retired. We have quite a few retirees that work for us. That really helps from an experience standpoint. I always tell folks I can train on auditing skills and background and things that you need. I can't train on experience. It's one of those things when you come to us, you either have it or you don't. Because they're the names, the faces, they're the brand of the company. And so when somebody has a bad experience of the audit, that comes back to me, and it's my job to figure out how can we improve it, how can we fix things. So again, as you can see, that theme, that continual improvement, which then comes to the last two pieces, quality of the audit and consistency of the audit. Because if I come in and do an audit, and the next year somebody else comes in, you want that audit to be similar in process. You don't want somebody the first year scoring 100% and the next year somebody coming in and scores you at a 60%. There's a disconnect. What happened there? So we work real hard in our training programs to bring that consistency and that quality of the training, which will then lead to the quality of the audit process. Here's really the importance of what we do and why we do it. Usually we don't have too many volunteers, folks that call me up to say, hey, I'm volunteering for an audit. I'd love to go through this process. It sounds like it's a really good thing. There are some that are out there, so I don't want to knock them. The majority of the folks, though, that come to us are coming to us because they have a brand to protect. And that's our job. Our job is to be that buffer between the brand and the farm and the consumer and the purchaser. So the retailers, the consumers, and the farms themselves. So it's a very important job. There's a lot of responsibility involved there. And it's one where when I'm talking to new auditors, I always say, what's your opinion on a certain stance? Pick any stance in the livestock industry, any species, pick a stance, where do you stand? And if they get really into a heated debate, I say, thank you for your time, you're not going to make a good auditor. Good auditors have to check their opinions at the door. You can't have an opinion. You're Switzerland. You got to ride the fence. Because it's no matter how you feel, you have to call a spade a spade. So when you walk out there to a farm and you're provided a set of standards, you have to sit down with that producer and say, whether you agree with these standards or not, we have to go through them in a professional standpoint. Here's what you're doing well. Here's where you're not meeting the standards. How can we get you to meet that standards? What we find 9 times out of 10 in these audits, these livestock audits that we do, it comes down to documentation. I've worked for enough farmers in my life. I know that documentation is something that you do on a rainy day, and then when it rains, you come up with something else to do. There's always equipment to fix, gates amend. There's always something else to do versus documentation. But in today's world, that documentation is key. It will help you in so many ways, and a lot of times, from a legality standpoint, you have to have that documentation. So as auditors, we're focused on the documentation. It is a piece of the business of what we need to do, but really the focus at the end of the day are the animals. Are they being taken care of? What's the quality of that farm? Because really the retailers and the wholesalers that we're working with, they're concentrated on what do we need to do to protect our brand. So Dr. Good, when he introduced myself, he said that at the time when he came to us, it was unique. He said, I need a set of standards for a bull stud. I said, wow, okay, that is good. We don't have anything on the shelf. So what do you do in a situation like that? You go and you find the experts. And he was one of the experts that helped us out. And you get experts around the table and you start hashing things out. What is good? What are key things that the public's concerned about? What are key things that research is showing? And then you start building and developing these standards. So this is just kind of a litany of folks that we work with. It can be industry comes to you that says, okay, here's a set of standards. We need a third-party auditing firm to come to audit, to validate that. It can be a certification organization. American Humane, Certified Humane, there's lots of them out there. I just listed a couple. They will come, man, that thing is close. They will come to you and ask you, can you audit to these standards? At that time, as a third-party auditing firm, you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision to say, can I audit to these standards, or from a company standpoint, are those standards so far out there that it will go against other audits that we're doing, strictly from a philosophy standpoint. And it's a difficult position to be in, and you have to sit down and go, okay, if we do make this decision to audit to these standards, that will then upset this group over here. That's third party. If you're making everybody happy, you're not doing your job. You're going to have people upset on both ends of the aisle, but at the same time, you're going to have folks happy on both sides, because it means at the end of the day that the retailers, wholesalers have a believability in what you're doing, and they will come back to you. We also have company-owned audits, which Dr. Good's group is a part of. Those are audit tools where they come to us, they say, we don't have anything for our industry, can you help us out? One of the audits that we put together are for cull sows. So sows that are no longer needed on the sow sites. They don't directly go to a market. They go to an intermediate market or a buying station. So how are those animals treated before they end up getting to final market? So we put together an audit tool that basically is a traceability and an animal welfare audit combined. So tracking those animals from the time they leave the sow farm to the time they get to the buy-in stations. Because really a buy-in station, they're not set up to hold these animals for very long. But what happens if you do? So ensuring that you have a plan. And then privately owned. So somebody will come to you and say, we've been doing these internal audits for years. We want to make sure that the public knows that we're doing something. Can you come in and audit to our independent internal audit tool? So that's kind of a litany and a background of the things that we do. And no matter what you do, it's always good to have an expert committee. You have to have somebody who's going to stand up and defend those standards. Somebody that says, here's the research behind it, here's the science behind it, and in today's world, here's the public perception behind it. That's probably the toughest thing from my standpoint, from the phone calls that I receive. Folks will say, well, where's the science to prove this? In today's world, there may not be the science behind it, but it may be a public perception standpoint. And one of the things we're working in right now is poultry. We do a lot of audits in the cage layer, cage-free industry with laying hens. So that's the debate right now. Cages are good because you can house them in a small group. You can manage them easier. When they lay the egg, it comes down, it hits a belt. And from a food safety standpoint, it's great. On the flip side, you have cage-free. You have 100,000 birds that are running together in a building. They lay eggs. Where are those eggs going? How long have they sat before an employee picked them up and put them on an egg belt? Both sides of the debate are very passionate about those action items. So at the end of the day, you have to have an expert committee that will stand up and say, okay, here's the research, here's the science, here's the public perception. Will the public keep buying your product if you keep raising it in this environment? So as a producer, you have to make that decision. Is that what my client wants, which is your wholesaler or retailer, which their clients are the consumers, or am I going to keep raising product the way I am? What I have found from doing this job as long as I have, there's a market for every product. And it comes to the consumer whether or not they want to pay the money for certain products. From our standpoint, we're that intermediate role to ensure that that product is meeting the standards that they're claiming. So the expert committee has to, I always use the term, have to have the foresight to be able to stand up and say, this is why those standards are set forth, and this is why we're standing behind them. But with any audit, it has to be outcome-based. So this is usually where challenges can occur, because you're dealing with different personalities, different perceptions. This is how I see it, and the producer may say, no, this is how I see it. But it has to come down to the welfare of the animal. So really most audits worth their grain of salt always comes down to feed, water, ventilation, dry place to lay down, facilities, overall condition of that animal. Sounds pretty basic. I try not to nutshell things, but that's really the basics of animal welfare. Are those animals being taken care of? Are the employees doing what they're supposed to be doing? So there's a lot of interviews of the employees. This is always the fun part, because you'll sit down with management, and management will always tell you what they think the auditor wants to hear. Then you go and talk to the employees. The employees will say, yeah, no, management, we haven't been doing that for years. Man, we changed that process internally because it didn't work. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, because now we're actually seeing what's being done. Most management and QA people, this is where they cringe, because they're like, oh, what's this person going to say? Are they going to remember the training that they went through? So having a very strong training program in place on your farm is very key. And then, like I said, documentation and records. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, it's always about the animal. That's why we get paid to do third-party audits. So we go out, we look randomly. If anybody on any audit tells you I look at every animal, that's just a bold-faced lie. That doesn't happen. There's not enough time. You can't look at every animal. What you look at is a statistical sample of the animals. So you go through, you look at your sample set, let's say it's every 5th animal, every 10th animal, boom, that's the animal you pick, and you do your scoring on it. Whether it's hygiene or locomotion, whether it's body condition score, that's the animal that you do. You mark that animal, you go on, you mark the next animal, you just continue the process. And what you're looking for in any audit process, what you're looking for is there a constant theme? Do I see it? If I see one lame animal, I'm not too worried. If I get to 5% of the animals are lame, now we have a concern. You know, now we've got something that we need to talk about. Body condition, this is always a key one, and this is where you really determine whether or not an auditor knows what they're talking about. When you start talking body condition scores of dairy cattle and they start comparing them to beef cattle, obviously you know you got the wrong individual on your farm. The toughest thing for our dairy guys is we don't score things on a quarter scale. They always, my expert guys, they always beat me up. Well, she's not a 1, she's a 1.25, or she's a 1.5. That gets really difficult, and that's where the judgment calls come into place, and that's where my phone really lights up. So what we did is say, okay, let's take some of the subjectiveness out of it. Let's do whole numbers. So a 1 through 5 scale, a 5 is a really fat cow, a 1 is a really skinny cow. You know them when you see them. Dairy cows are naturally skinny, so most dairy producers are pretty happy if they're falling in that 2 to 2.5 to 3 scale. That's where they want to be. The beef guys look at that cow and go, whew, she should have been culled weeks ago. You know, she should have left the farm. So if during the training processes, if we have an auditor that starts using beef terminology versus dairy terminology, that's when you know you don't have the right individual. Prime example, it's happened to myself. It's key to know the terminology. I was on a turkey farm, and turkey folks are very partial to their turkeys, and I accidentally used the word chick instead of poult, and that turkey producer was like, have you ever been on a turkey farm? So even a slightest slip of the word will get you grilled very heavily, which is good because you want to make sure the people on your farm know what they're talking about. Because when you walk into a chicken facility, an egg laying operation, these keywords you hear today, you hear the words cage free, sometimes the consumer automatically thinks these birds are running outside. Cage free means multiple different things, and that's where definitions get the industry as well. This is cage free. This is an aviary system. You have birds that are running in a building that's 50 feet by 400 feet, and this is very difficult to manage, but that's how they manage them. So you know right away, and if the consumer sees a picture like that, they go, well, I thought I was buying cage free eggs. Well, you are. This is a segment of cage free. If you want pasture raised, then those are the eggs that you should be buying. So definitions are very key in our industry. Space allocation is key too. Do those animals have a place to lay down? Is it dry? You know, this picture was taken a couple weeks from market. At that point, it's always key. You have to make a decision on that day and what the facility looks like at that day. So that day, yeah, those pigs have enough space to lay down. In a week or two, as those pigs are pushing, those market hogs are pushing 300 pounds or so, it's going to get a little tight. So the timing of the audit is key, and ensuring that you had enough space, because weeks ago when those pigs were 75 pounds, there was more than enough space. They were probably running the heaters in there as well. So audits, it's very key to make sure they're scored. And the reason for that, and the reason I push for a scored audit process, is it comes back to continual improvement. If you score an audit and you know how you score, then the goal is you want to aim higher than the score that you got last year. That's just competition. That's just human drive. And so that's how the audits are set up, because you always want to achieve a higher score than what you got the last time. So each one of these has a score, point total assigned to it. Records and documentation, not as much as animal welfare, because that's the key of, that's the whole crux of the audit process. There are some pass-fail criteria on any audit. Willful acts of abuse, lack of feed, lack of water. So those activities that animal needs to live. So those are pass-fail criteria. And then there's usually a threshold. So if you're wanting to achieve a certification, usually it's right around that 80% and above. If you hit that, most entities are going to grant you your certification from that standpoint. But then this is where the continual improvement piece kicks in. Because let's say you get a nonconformance, and this is usually my biggest thing when I'm talking to producers sitting across the table. They go, okay, well, where did I fail? Okay, and unless you're out there beating your animals, you didn't fail anywhere. Here's the points points of improvement or continual improvement. This is called the corrective action plan. This is simply the plan of attack that site's going to do to address the issue. What's our plan? How are we going to fix it? It may take us several years. It may take capital and resources and assets to change the facility, and it may take a couple years. The prime example that I have is the poultry industry, where the guys are moving from cage to cage free. That's not an overnight deal. It takes several years to get there. So who's responsible for making sure that it gets done? And then depending on the audit cycle, whether or not how that gets verified. Most of the time it's verified through a phone conversation if it's documentation. But if it is something high enough, it may result in somebody going back out and looking that over. So this is really where most folks are really interested in, well, who gets to see the audit? The whole process is really surrounded around whoever signs the contract. So if we're doing an audit for the packer gets the audit results. If we sign it with the producer gets the audit results. We cannot release those results without somebody telling us. So if you want us to release them to Costco, to Walmart, to whoever, Whole Foods, we have to have that correspondence. We have to have that communication. Those entities are interested. They want to see, how are you doing? You're telling us you're going through audits. Prove it. Let's see the audit scores. Usually, I tell new auditors, when you're done for the first time, you're just going to sit down and you're going to thank them for their time, and they're going to say, how'd I do? You're not going to get a chance to say anything else. They're going to say, how'd I do? Can I keep selling in this market? I don't think we're not regulatory. We're voluntary. We've never kept anybody out of any market. We've had folks that have decided, I don't want to do this anymore. I've been raising animals for 45 years. If you're going to expect me to keep doing documentation, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that's a conversation to have. Usually I say, well, do you have a son or daughter that's coming back? Because if they want to sell into this market, they're probably going to want to do the documentation for you. So that's usually when son and daughter come in, you have that conversation. They're, oh, yeah, I do this on the iPad. That's no big deal. Oh, okay, we're good then. So, but that's it's a changing world, and it is amazing how quickly retailers and wholesalers want to see those results as well. I got ahead of myself there. And then, more importantly, what we've tried to do is for those consumers, I usually get a consumer call once or twice a week. It's a random call out of the blue. They say, I bought this product at XYZ. It's got your label on it. I want to know, what does that mean? What does that mean when that label's on the end product? What I tell folks is, well, what that means is this producer has had an independent third-party audit. Somebody has gone out to their facility, and they've been audited to a set of standards. phone will go quiet. They'll rethink another question, and they'll go, well, I bought this milk because I wanted to ensure that that animal is properly taken care of. Yes, that's what that certification means. Oh, okay. Thank you for your time. Phone hangs up. So that's what a lot of the calls are about. Some of them want to know, well, does your audit get into what they're being fed? Unless the standards tell us that they need X, Y, and Z, most animal welfare audits don't go into that depth. They typically say that you're working with a nutritionist and that diet meets the ration for that animal. And that's really how far we take it. So at the end of the day, our role, it's an important role. We're kind of that mediator, if you will, in between the producer and the retailer and wholesalers. It is a position that we take very seriously, and it's, the number of years that we've done this audit, I always tell auditors it only takes one bad audit to ruin your reputation. So we stress the fact that we want that audit to be done very professionally and the best experience that we can. One of the things that we always talk about with auditors is always point out things that are going well. There's always good things that are happening on these farms. The audit process doesn't always have to be looked at as a negative event. So continuous improvement. What can we do to improve that operation? And then the other point that I'll drive home too with continual improvement is bundling. What can we do to alleviate some of the concerns that the producer has? And that's start to bundle these audits together where you can set a team out there and do multiple things for that producer in one trip.